for today's episode, right, Mary?
Right.
We actually have a guest that I had met, gosh, many years ago, Dr. Marie. I don't remember exactly when, but I attended the training that she and her husband have um, uh, put on, for many years. And I don't want to go into detail about it yet until I introduce her, but I've known Dr. Marie for a long, long time. And so, Dr. Marie, I'm going to kind of read your bio so our listeners and viewers will know exactly who we're talking to. So, Dr. Marie Peters trained as a pediatrician specializing in hematology oncology. She worked in the United States, Canada, and France. In 1985, she met Professor Jerome Lejeune and joined his research team in Paris, France. Together, they worked on the cellular metabolic consequences of chromosomal imbalances research, for which she was given the now I may be saying this wrong, Prix Gallet et Breton, which is Academy of Medicine in Paris in 1991. After Professor Lejeune's death in 1994, she continued as medical director of the International Foundation for Genetic Research, which is the Michael Fund, until 1996. Starting in 1992, Dr. Peters Ney worked with her husband to train counselors throughout the world to deal with the damage caused by abuse and abortion. And that was the training that I attended. Together, they founded, I'm going to call it now, IHAC, the International Hope Alive Counselors Association, with branches in every continent. In recent years, her and her husband, Dr. Ney, Philip Ney, focused more on the implication, the psychological impact on society of being an abortion survivor. And we've never talked about that on this show. Well, I mentioned it a little bit. Equally, especially of being the sibling of a person who was terminated. So, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Marie Peters Ney.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you very much.
Well,
I'm I'm very happy to be here and to talk on behalf of millions of people, young people who have been hurt by abortion. And it started a long time ago when my husband was talking at a big world meeting of Holocaust survivors. And after the war, people thought people who came out of concentration camps would be happy. I'm out. And they found a large number of depressions and suicides. And not only the people who had been in the camps, but their children and grandchildren were impacted. And so my husband said to this audience, he said, what would happen in a society where the perpetrator was not some outside political force, but the perpetrator was inside the family? And he was met with shock and silence because people realized that this would be extremely damaging. Now, I have a special interest in survivors because I'm a pediatrician and because I had a personal experience of being a survivor.
mm,
And at the age of 6, I had a brain trauma and went into coma and was brought to St. John's University Hospital in New York. And in my room, we were 4 children. And every time I would come out of my coma, another child was dying.
mm,
And my mother would tell me, oh, he was in a car accident, or She was in a fire and was burnt, and another one was a cancer victim. And so I am the only child who was wheeled out of that room.
Mm.
And I realized later that it had a great impact, and I had survivor pathology. I was on the outside looking in. I was wondering why the heck am I alive? Anyway, all sorts of things. So when I started working with Philip and we were doing Hope Live groups, I noticed that there were people who didn't say they were survivors, but their drawings were incredibly showing some deep hurt, and they would draw very light, almost invisible persons, or they would draw big eyes that were looking, or a mouth that was screaming.
Mm.
And I could identify from the drawings who was a survivor and who was not. So anyway, so that's oh, and then I'm sorry, I had also when I was working in hematology oncology, I I remember one night the nurse called me and said your patient is going crazy. And it was a 14-year-old boy who was in bone marrow, had just had a bone marrow for a relapsed leukemia. So I said, I'll go down and see him. And I masked and gowned and came in, and he was hitting the walls and screaming. And after about 10 minutes, he looks at me and he says, are you going to kill me? And I said, sweetheart, it's 2 in the morning. I want to go back to bed. So let's get on with this. And what had happened is his mother had become pregnant. And she said, tomorrow I will not come and see you because we are going to check that the baby is all right. And so, being in abortion culture, he knew if the baby was not all right, the baby would not be allowed to live. Right?
Mm.
So he, in his isolation bubble there, he said, "What happens if my bone marrow doesn't work?
Mm.
Are they going to kill me if I'm not okay?" And then I remember another time a grandmother coming because her grandchild had nightmares every night and was screaming, where did they put the baby?
Mm.
Right? So I realized that it's in the culture and that kids know about this and it has some kind of impact on them. So um, I don't I don't know, Molly, would you like me to talk more about the survivors now or would you like to go off?
Well, I was going to ask about how go back a bit about how Dr. Nay and you found abortion damage through your counseling. But I think
Okay.
uh, if we can tap into that, and then we're going to move
Yeah.
into discovering the abortion survivors.
Yeah. So Dr. Nay was a psychiatrist, right? So he saw people and he realized that, oh my goodness, there's something happening and women are hurting. And yeah, so he picked her up, right? And I think it was a gift of God because I was just doing my research. And every week I would encounter a woman, a friend, a mother of a Down syndrome patient who would just spontaneously cry out, "It's God's punishment. The Down syndrome child is God's punishment." Or, "I didn't want to do it. What didn't you want to do?" Anyway, I I realized, I did not know how to speak. I did not know how to talk to these women. And it was a very deep pain, and it was not easy to talk. And I went looking for people. Sorry. Mhm. People I could refer these women to. I
And I know
and
you need to get a drink, but you're referring to women who've had abortions and you didn't
right.
know how to minister to them, how to counsel with them. Mhm. Because there was nothing out there. Mhm.
And the pain was so deep, and there was no way of you know. So anyway, so that's and then as I went looking around, the hospital psychologist said, "Oh, it's not an issue." And then I would see pastors or priests, and they said, "Oh, they can come." And I'm here in Paris, and I said, "These people are way out left field. What am I going to say? Come and see a pastor?" It's like,
Mm.
how do I go from here to there, right? And then a friend, Vicky Thorne. I don't know if you knew Vicky. She's deceased now. She had a she had a ministry, and she sent me Philip Ney's articles, and I was amazed. I said, "This man understands,"
Mm.
because abortion is the tip of an iceberg of pain, right? And so just zeroing in on that is unfair to the woman, because she has a whole story, a whole life story. She has been neglected, emotionally abused. And so he put it in the context of a woman's life. And
Mm.
it was not just one event, it was a whole talking about everything that happened. So, and he had a group psychotherapy model, which was very useful because it's very hard to open up about an abortion or some traumatic event or rape or whatever. But in a group, it's much easier because one person will talk about whatever, her rape or her abuse, and then the other person is given the permission to share, right? And so I found it, and it was um, a program with a beginning and an end. So it didn't go on forever and ever and ever. And it wasn't, some programs are too short, right? The woman doesn't have time to. So, yeah.
So are we're so I can follow you. We're talking about
Yeah.
coming up with a program and how to counsel with women who've had abortions. And this was back in what year are we talking about? What years are you referring
Like
to?
late 90s, 2000.
Okay. And then I know Mary had a question about um, abortion and what it could be linked to. Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, thank you, Molly. And that was one of the issues that we see coming up in our podcast is how many women that have abortions have some type of abuse in their early childhood. And I wondered if you had a connection, if you saw a connection in your work with your husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Philip Philip wrote way back in the 80s an article about the cyclic connection between abuse and abortion.
Mhm.
Okay, so a woman who has been neglected, a woman who has been abused, sexually abused, or emotionally abused, is more likely to get into some kind of bad relationship, right? She's looking for comfort, she's looking for being affirmed, and then she finds herself pregnant. She doesn't know who to talk to, um, and because she doesn't see her self-worth, so she's not worthy. So whatever, the
And her baby
baby's
wouldn't be worthy. Mhm. Mhm.
anything,
Or
right?
she
So
doesn't have what it takes to protect that because
yeah,
she wasn't
yeah,
protected. And so she didn't
right,
have those skills of, our parenting and her maternal skills to protect her own children.
right, right.
I could see that in my own life, yeah.
Yeah,
I can see it in mine too, as you're saying
yeah.
that, Dr. Marie. Yes. Mhm.
And so
You
now
know,
he's discovered this link between some type of childhood abuse and abortion, and then it could be very, what I want to say, I don't want to say cyclical, but it can create a pattern of repetition.
yeah,
Not only,
yeah,
with multiple abortions and multiple trauma from that, but also if the mother doesn't heal from that trauma and continue through,
yeah,
childhood abuse trauma healing, then her children can end up in the abortion clinics. It
yeah,
could go generational.
yeah,
And
right.
that's what I learned through Hope Alive training and, you know, through the activism that I've been involved in, for 25 years. But let's move on then to um, how you and Dr. Nay. Well, I want to save that for last because I want to talk about Hope Alive training last. But now that you're seeing um, the pattern between abuse and abortion, then how the abortion impacts the family
Yeah,
and in the children that are born into that family, which is you and Dr. Nay discovered abortion survivor syndrome. So now I really want to focus on that.
okay. So if a woman had an abortion and then she heals and she gets married, she still has the child in her head because you do not get rid of a child, right? So, okay. So then she's pregnant. She has a nice husband, but the pregnancy will trigger a little bit of flashback, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit, God is going to punish me. I'm going to have an abnormal child. Think like that. And so when the baby is born, the mother has either she takes the child and holds him too tightly, or she says, I'm tired, put the child in the bassinet. And so many midwives and nurses have told us they can tell at the time of delivery if a
Mm.
mother had an abortion, a previous abortion or not. Okay? So the child grows up as a replacement child.
Mhm.
And so these are very subtle things, right?
Right.
And maybe the child will try and ask the mother, do I have an older brother? And there's a reaction
Mm.
on the part of the mother which is a little bit, no, why are you saying this? Go out and play. And so the child knows there's some secrets, that some things he can't talk to his mother about. And so these children will develop like a protective bubble because they cannot totally communicate with the mother. There's a secret, there's a little something.
She's
The child
closed off.
knows
Yeah, she's closed off
a
about
little
certain
bit.
things. Or
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so now it's a disaster with modern culture because the child has his little iPad, his little cell phone, and wanders off in his little world. Right?
Hmm.
And the children, they live in their bubble and they have a lot of friends on Facebook and they have porn, virtual sex, right? And um, and yeah, that's a very big and difficult issue that we have to deal with.
Right.
Where the person that, and in the religious life, they cut themselves a little bit away from God, who's an authority figure. Yeah. So
Sorry, I'm writing. I'm
yeah,
writing
this is
notes here. Hmm.
yeah
So, um, Dr. Marie, you mentioned
yeah
that there's children who are born in to a mother who's had an abortion. So that's one type of abortion survivor, correct? What
yeah.
other type of survivors have you and Dr. Nay discovered in your counseling
Okay.
practices?
Now we see more and more children, and then the mother becomes pregnant, and they abort that child. And so the children, I remember a very beautiful woman in Germany, and she remembers that she kept asking her mother, I want a sister, I want a sister. And then one morning, the mother comes into her room and says, you don't really want a sister. You would have to share your bedroom and we wouldn't be able to go skiing and blah, 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 blah. And the little girl is half asleep and she says, no, it's okay, Mom, I don't want a sister.
Mm.
And then she hears the car driving off. And she sits up. She's 10 years old. She sits up and she says, I killed my sister.
Wow.
Right? If I had said something, because she realized the mother's going off for an abortion, and 20 years later, that woman is still struggling with the guilt of having taken part in the abortion.
Oh, and she really didn't.
Because it's terrifying. And then the mother says, oh, and the child says, my mother always said I was a horrible pregnancy and she suffered during delivery and I'm always asking for things and I cost too much. And if I were a better child, my mother would love children and would not go for abortion.
Wow. Wow.
So projecting a responsibility onto the child that really wasn't hers.
Yeah. But the children, not the parents don't say it's your fault, but somehow in the whole discourse, the child feels if I had been better, if I had not asked for a sibling.
Wow. So,
I've been, just one more example. I've been working with a guy, and when the mother was pregnant, the dad said, abort, abort, abort. And the mother said, no. And then the dad said, okay, we'll keep this one, but any subsequent child will be aborted. And now this man, he's my age, still feels the guilt. My brother is dead because I'm alive.
Mm.
Because the agreement had been, we'll abort another, if there's another child, we'll abort. So, yeah.
So then what I'm hearing is so a child born into, the replacement child, which is the next child
Yeah.
born after a first abortion. And then the children whose siblings were aborted after they were born.
Yeah.
And does that include the scenario that you were talking about, that child starting to feel guilty? It could have been my fault that my sibling was aborted, or if I was a better child, maybe my parents would have had more children. Okay. And so because I know there's 10 types of survivors from what I remember. Which would be which is another another category?
Another one is a rebellious teenager, and the mother says, "You stupid child! I could have aborted you."
Mm.
So that's like, it would have been better if you had been dead.
Mm. Mm.
And that's a pretty strong thing to throw at a teenager, right? Or then in a place like China, every child that's alive must wonder how many siblings
Right.
I have.
Right. Because in China, there was just a one child policy. Lucky in some areas that you might be able to have 2 children, but then the mothers would be forced to abort. They had to even pay for their own abortions and had to deal with their dead babies. But the mothers would choose to abort the female children over male children because males are more prized in the family. And so now we have a big gender imbalance in countries such as China and India, where there's a lot more men than there are women. So that causes another problem. Well, we're about out of time, but I want to continue on. Mary, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I just wanted to ask the doctor that you are an MD, right? And your husband was a psychiatrist. But when you were 6, you had a brain problem. I think it's interesting. And so you even had survivor syndrome from from knowing what happened to the other children in the room, the 3 other children in the room with you. But I do think it's interesting that you then have been a participant then in healing related to survivor.
Yeah.
So I wonder what your observations of that are.
Well, I feel I understand, right? Because there are no movies about survivors, abortion survivors, no books. Although some of the recent literature, like the Harry Potter or the Hunger Games, are full of survivor themes.
Wow.
But anyway,
we can dive into that, but
yes,
I believe, Mary and Marie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Hope Alive training and the Hope Alive counseling program walks people through not only childhood abuse healing and abortion recovery, but also survivor syndrome. Is that correct?
yes. Although we realized the survivor therapy is actually something that's going to take a long time, because it's like the Valley of Bones in Ezekiel. They have been so dehumanized, you have to put layer after layer after layer. Rebuild trust, rebuild a sense of reality, a sense of I'm worth something, right?
Right.
Um, yeah.
So we're going to continue
So
this.
to
We
me,
only went through
okay.
several abortion survivor syndromes, but I do want to end with this because we're talking about, children and the impact of being an abortion survivor. And I remember speaking at a Catholic school years ago, and I was talking, of course, pro-life. I was sharing my testimony, but I asked these young children, what do you think about abortion? And they, of course, were kind of giving the talking points that they've heard, it's bad, God doesn't like it, those kind of things. I said, no, no, no. I've been open and honest with you. I want to know from your heart, what do you think about abortion being legal? And they're traumatized. They live in fear. They're afraid that if they're not good enough, will they be killed?
Yeah.
They don't feel their life is valuable because kids can be disposed of so easily. Children can be disposed of so easily. So they don't see value in their own lives. They don't have purpose, you know, and then that fear syndrome. So we want to talk more about this, and I want everybody out there to know that Mary and I are going to do a part 2 with Dr. Marie Peters-Ney and continue our conversation about abortion survivor syndrome, because it's so prevalent, but it's so important to know and to recognize so that we can start speaking about it and helping people heal from that. So, Dr. Marie, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to part 2. Mary, is there something you would like to say before we sign off?
No, well, I am so thankful that we have Dr. Marie on today, because I've heard you reference this kind of groundbreaking training and revelation that Dr. Ney and her husband had been on the front line for. So I just am thankful.
Me too. For a
Very
long, long
thankful.
time, they've been involved in this. So we look forward to seeing you in part 2. And we look forward to seeing y'all watching part 2, because it's just going to be packed full of information. And thank you for tuning in to More to the Story with Molly White. We'll see you again next time. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, don't